Together we learn, together we grow, together we heal, together we flow. Be cool, every teacher, every school. 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 Be cool, every teacher, every school.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Todd Scholl. I serve as the lead learner for the SCEA Center for Educator Wellness and Learning. We call ourselves CEWL. And tonight is our final episode of season 2 of our CEWL Beans induction podcast. And with us, as always, Dr. Marcella Weinsnyder and Angelica McDonald. How are you tonight, Marcella and Angelica?
Great. We have a really good topic tonight, so I'm excited.
Doing really great this week, especially since it's the last week of school before break. So I'm very excited.
That's awesome. Congratulations. This is just such an amazing time of year for educators. It's been a long stretch from the end of spring break to this time with all the testing and things, and student hormones running wild. And it can be a really challenging time of year, but so happy for all of you and hope that all of the educators who are out there who are watching will take some time to really renew themselves, recharge over the summer. Don't just work if you can help it. I know when I was teaching, especially in the early part of my career, I was working, second, third jobs over the summer. So I get that, but I hope that folks who are watching will take some time to invest in their wellness. So tonight, talking about financial tips, which is a really practical thing and something I wish that I had sort of a mentor when I was in the early stages of my career. I wound up doing some things that were smart, but it took me a long time to figure things out financially. And so tonight we're here to offer these early career educators some tips on how to manage your finances. And I thought we'd start the conversation today with talking about some of the pitfalls, some of the mistakes that we can make with our finances and how to avoid those. So I will start with Marcella. What are some mistakes or some pitfalls that newer teachers may want to watch out for?
Okay, so one pitfall to watch out for is to make sure that you know and understand your salary schedule for your district. I think that quite a few early career educators don't think about that. They know that they're going to get paid, but they don't take the time to pay attention to how much they're going to get paid and where they're actually entering on that salary schedule. So that would be the first piece of advice that I would give them, is to make sure you know where you stand on the salary schedule. So make sure you know how to actually read the salary schedule, like with your years of experience and your entry levels, and how you will sort of earn money or move throughout the steps, as you add another year of service to your teaching career. So know and understand the salary schedule. One thing for me, what was a pitfall when I first started, I really didn't understand that I wouldn't get paid during the summer. And I believe that there was an option, and I just didn't pay close enough attention to that. So I wasn't getting paid during the summer. Luckily for me, I was always interested in teaching summer school, which also added years of experience when it was time for me to retire. So I worked during the summer. But what if I did not work during the summer? I would not be getting paid during the summer. So I know that a lot of human resources representatives take the opportunity now to make sure that new instructors and our early career educators know that information firsthand. So that is a positive in districts these days.
Angelica, any thoughts on that?
Definitely, Marcel, you were correct about that pay schedule because I was confused. Even though I understood about the pay schedule, I didn't understand about the years. So when I started, I'm believing I'm a first year teacher, but on the pay scale, it starts at 0 years. And so I remember when I first got my paycheck, I was very upset and I called HR. I'm laughing about it now. I was like, hey, you guys are not, paying me correctly. They're like, how long you've been teaching? I was like, I've been teaching a full, it's 1 year, and they had explained to me I start at 0 years and then it moves up. So in my mind, yes, I'm a first year teacher, but you actually start off with 0 years experience, which makes sense because I had 0 years of experience in the classroom. So it's very important to know about your pay schedule and your and how do you actually move up to. And also I found out you also have to be careful about how many absences you take too, because that can take off certain years too. So if you don't teach a certain amount of years, because on your contract you have to have certain amount of days, and if you don't have that, that can actually keep you from moving up on the pay scale. I just found that out a few weeks ago. So I'm not sure if that's for every district, but I found out about that. Another thing to know about is, or pitfall that can happen, is if you're not being careful about your spending. I know that sounds very simple, but you'll be very, because I was very frugal with my money, and I still am in pretty much many ways. But sometimes I've noticed, especially on TikTok, like the new trend that if you're stressed, just go out and just buy something. I forgot what it's called. It was something on TV, and people were like kind of using that meme. I can't think off at the top of my head, but if you're sad for a moment, just go ahead and have a spending spree, which can, be good at sometimes, but be careful with your spending, especially with small things and small subscriptions. Because I didn't notice, especially as I started looking at my budget, wait, $10 a month is going to this place and to this, and I'm actually not using it. So a key thing is making sure you have a budget. And I know when people hear budget, they're like, "Oh, budget." But my dad did very well with me and my sisters when we were younger, starting off with like small things. So like seeing where is your money going? Because you may say, "Oh, I'm not making that much money," but really you might be actually have, a lot in your account, but you have to know where your money is going. So being careful, like where you're spending, and also looking at your contract too, making sure that if you're using too many days, it could actually go against your contract. So just be careful with that as well.
Those are great tips. I have a 24-year-old daughter, a 20-year-old son, and my number one thing that I told them to avoid is it's really easy when you have a credit card to buy things and for that to add up. And then, you can just make the minimum payment, which doesn't seem like a lot. What I think people don't realize is the amount of interest that you're going to pay, particularly on credit cards. And especially sometimes they'll have like an introductory year where it's a low percentage interest rate, maybe for 3 months, 6 months, a year. And then if you're carrying that balance and you don't get it paid off, those interest rates can go up 15, 20% or even higher in some cases. And the thing about that interest is it's just money out the window. So if you're carrying, say, a $5,000 balance and you're paying 20% on it, that's $1,000. I mean, it's a lot of money, and it adds up. And again, you're getting no benefit out of that interest that you're paying. So there are certain times where interest makes sense. So I buy a house. When I'm younger, I can't afford to buy a house or a condo or an apartment cash. So I have to have a loan, and I pay interest on that. And sometimes you might want a car, and then maybe you get a loan on that. But the credit card debt is really a lot of that is sometimes just like you said, Angelica, it's not budgeting yourself and just going out and spending because you got approved for a credit card and you can do it. You can do this minimum payment. And over time, you're just spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on interest. And that is just money that's wasted. So setting that budget and I think using a credit card, a lot of people will prefer to pay with cash or a debit card so they know they're not going to go over their limit. Credit cards, though, can have an advantage because you can get sometimes cash back, like 3% cash back on certain purchases. Like my credit card, I think it gets a 2% unlimited. So it's like getting a 2% coupon and everything, but I pay off the entire balance at the end of the month. I never carry a balance over and pay interest. So essentially, I'm paying 98% for everything that I'm paying. So that would be my number one thing. The other pitfall I think that is related to this is sometimes you get excited because you get your first job and you got that paycheck coming in and you want to go out and buy a car, you want to go out and buy some things for yourself or even family members. And it's really easy to overextend yourself trying to buy that fancy car. I just really want that Toyota 4Runner. I really want this, fancy car. It's going to be really cool to have. And you may even qualify for that loan, but then you get into it, you realize, oh, I've got to pay insurance and I've got to pay taxes and I got to put gas in it. And, I've got to get new tires for it. And I've got to take it for an oil change and all of those things adding up. Then you realize that's just crashing my budget. So be, like you said, that frugality when you start, it's better to live beneath your means and not be in debt and not have that stress if you can, than to overextend yourself and constantly be wondering at the end of the month, am I going to be able to pay all of my bills? Because that stress, it is so cumulative and it can lead to health issues and then you don't know, like circumstances change and you don't want to be stuck with a car loan, a $50,000 car loan that you can't afford, and then it gets repossessed or whatever. So then you get bad credit, and it's just, so you don't want to mess up your credit when you're younger if you can help it.
And kind of to add to what you said, Todd, another pitfall when you were talking made me remember, don't compare yourself to other people. And that also causes spending, because I know a lot of young people, they might see other people, like traveling and doing all these other things. And they feel like they have to do it too. Like they're spending, like if you're on TikTok, they have all these spending hauls. Like, well, they're, doing this and doing that. But one, you don't know their lifestyle. You don't know how they're making that money. And also because of the partnerships they have. And two, a lot of people on social media are actually in debt, but they're just trying to show off. So it's not really what you're showing off, but it's really, are you able to live? So don't compare your finances to other people because you don't know their lifestyle. And just because someone's posting something on Facebook or social media doesn't mean they really have that money. So don't feel like, oh, I have to get a credit card because they do, or I need to go on these millions and millions of trips because this person is doing that. And there's other ways you can still travel. You can still, go on these trips for maybe cheap or for free, but you don't have to be like other people. And that causes a lot of young people, I noticed, to want to spend more because they see other people doing it. So do not compare yourself or your finances or your situation to other people.
Yeah.
That's an excellent point.
Yeah, that's a great point, Angelica. One piece of advice I think is really crucial, what you mentioned, Todd, earlier, is to live beneath your means, especially for an early career educator. We're starting off with 0 years of experience now in South Carolina at about $47,000 a year. I think next year there is going to be a raise, about a $1,500 raise, so that's $48,500. So you're starting off with that salary. But very important, one is to live beneath your means, but also, like you mentioned, Angelica, to make sure that you have a budget. Learning how to budget early on is going to set you up for success. And so oftentimes when I talk to early career educators, I tell them to create a budget, just write down all of your bills, everything that you're spending money on. And you'll be surprised about how many subscriptions you have that you don't need or you don't utilize. How much money you're spending on iced coffees at McDonald's or Starbucks, how much money you're spending on, eating out. Mm-hmm. So try to make as many meals as you can at home. Take your lunch with you to work to try to avoid some of those expenses, because it can really weigh you down and cut into your budget.
Yeah, that's absolutely. It's just really easy, like you said, Angelica, when you see other people having these things and you like, oh man, I really like to have a new outfit, or I'd really like to have whatever, like you said, go on this really great trip. And I think I've always tried to find this sort of balance, right? Because I don't want to be so frugal that I don't enjoy my life, that I don't take some of the money that I earn and enjoy it. The question is, do you want to put yourself in a bad financial situation? Is it worth putting yourself into debt and putting your finances in jeopardy? So we talked a little bit about sort of some of the pitfalls to avoid, I'd like to talk about some of the things that folks can do that maybe the early career educators haven't thought of to set themselves up for financial success. So what are some of the things, the positive things that we can do, not just the pitfalls, but the positive things we can do to set ourselves up for that success?
Yeah.
So,
I think one thing we could do is to sort of maximize our earning potential early on out the gate. See how you can move up that salary schedule. See how you can, maybe if there's a side hustle and you have the capacity, the mental capacity to do so, then by all means do it. There are side hustles like, creating manipulatives for teachers pay teachers. You could coach a sport. You could be the lead or advisor for a club. All of those pay supplements that you may be able to take advantage of at school.
Angelica?
Another way is also, so I know we talked about budgeting as well, because you can also figure out ways you can actually gain more money when you create a budget, and there's easy ways. So what I tried, and it was actually kind of cool, I used ChatGPT to see if it could make me a good budget, because I get paid twice a month. What I was struggling with the twice a month, like I would spend a little bit, because I noticed I have more bills near the end of the month versus the beginning. And sometimes I would spend a little bit more, and even though I would still pay all my bills, but it felt like I was struggling at the end. So I asked ChatGPT to make my budget for me, and it showed me how I could save money at the beginning of the month and then hold most of that money until the end of the month. And I still had a lot of money. I was surprised of actually how much money I actually had to spend or to save. So you can actually use ChatGPT to help create your budget, or you can use something simple. Like my mom bought me this, it's like a little planner, and you can have everything in here. You can hold your money. Another thing I was doing too, you never know how much money, or sometimes I know we don't really use cash a lot these days, but whenever you get cash, my mom had this, and it's like a savings challenge, and you can put, I'm not going to open it so you can see my money, but you can, every so often you can put like $1 here, $2, and over time, by the end of the year, you can have $5,000 of savings. So kind of check of where you're actually getting maybe extra cash. Like during my birthday, I actually don't spend my birthday money. I just save my birthday money, and then I keep it in my savings. And then over time, I'm like, wow, I actually have a lot of money. And another way you can actually sometimes even look at your school. Sometimes they might offer tutoring services. And we talked about this way at the beginning before we started. Todd, you mentioned something. You said, don't do it for free. And that is very important. But see where there's some actually opportunities at your school. So Marcelo talked about summer school. I know for a few years I was doing tutoring at the end of school. Sometimes it could show up or didn't, but you can still get paid for that. So see what are opportunities in your school if you don't want to create maybe your own thing, but see what are other opportunities, especially for young teachers or new teachers. They really try to get you at the beginning, but the key thing, make sure you're getting paid. If you're doing a club, are you getting paid for that? So make sure you ask that at the very beginning, like, are you going to get paid for that? And you can get, extra income from that.
Awesome. So I've got 4 tips that I want to share with young folks. I share this with my daughter and my son.
Okay.
So the number one thing is when you're looking at debt and you're trying to get debt paid off, prioritize by the interest rate you're paying. So in other words, if you're in credit card debt and it's at 15% and you have an auto loan and it's at say 6%, you want to prioritize the debt that's at the higher interest rate. This is kind of simple math, right? And it's because if you can get those higher rate loans or debts paid off, then you can start tackling the lower rate ones. But you want to, the sooner you get the higher rate ones paid off, the better. Second thing, if you have the opportunity, which all educators in the state do, to invest in your 401k, get in the habit of doing that. Even if it's just $20 or $25 a month, start investing in your retirement. Start investing in your 401k. You will be surprised what like $100 to $150 a month can do over time. That money, historically, if you put it in an index fund, that money will go anywhere from like 9 to 11% a year. And that, someone showed me how that sort of like almost works exponentially. That money will start to pile up over time. And it may not seem like a lot to put $100 a month in, but over time it will add up. So get in the habit of of investing in your 401k, your retirement accounts. I do want to say this. I acknowledge the fact for young people, like compared to folks my age, that you have college loans that we didn't have that are crazy. It's much harder to get a home now. A home that used to cost 150,000 now costs like 450,000. So even to qualify for that is tough, especially with the interest rates the way they are. So that also makes rent go up. So I want to just acknowledge that this is challenging, and that when I offer these suggestions, that I realize that there are some struggles that you're having, especially educators who are making that 47 at the beginning, just trying to make ends meet. It's tough, but you don't want to make it that situation worse by adding up more debt that you're going to have struggle to pay off. The third thing, if you have money that you're able to save and you don't want to put it into a 401k, there is a savings account and then there are money market accounts. Go and have a conversation at your bank. Say you have $1,000 in savings. It might be only making like 0.01%, some really low amount of interest. You can maybe shift that over into a money market account and make 4%. Like I'm making 4% in a money market account. So go in and have a conversation with your bank and ask them about like money market accounts and see if that makes sense for you, and listen carefully to the details of that. But for me, it made a huge, huge difference because I was getting less than 1%. Now I'm getting over 4% on my money market account. And the last thing I'll say is when you can buy property, it's really good if you are in a position where you can purchase property. That is a good thing for you to do rather than renting, because renting won't build equity. Renting is money that you're giving to somebody else to live somewhere, but you can never get that money back. Whereas if you're able to, as soon as you're able to buy a property, if that property goes up even 3 or 4% a year, and say you have a $100,000 property and it goes up 3 or 4%, that's $3,000 or $4,000 you made doing nothing. And owning your property, part of that money, part of your payment goes to bring that principal down, which means that eventually maybe you can sell it and make a profit from the sale of that home. So I highly encourage young people, if and when you're able to, don't overextend yourself to do it. But when you can comfortably do it and qualify, to try to get a property. And going back to your point, Angelica, that may mean you're not getting that 4-bedroom beautiful house that you'd love to have. It may mean a 1-bedroom apartment somewhere to start with. I started in a $70,000 2-bedroom condo, and over time worked my way up to a 3-bedroom home, 4-bedroom home, and so forth. And in each home, I was able to make a little bit of money because I built up equity in the home. So those are my 4 tips for folks starting out in terms of starting to build your wealth.
Okay. All right. So here are some of the tips I shared. I'm glad you shared what you shared with your son and daughters. What I shared with my sons first is to calculate your financial baseline, which is basically, all your essential living costs, rent, mortgage, utilities, transportation, groceries, and other bills, and sort of try to keep that number below 50 to 60% of your take home pay. And then also have at least 1 month when you're first starting out, have at least 1 month's worth of living costs saved somewhere in an easy to access savings account for emergency funds. So for example, if your car breaks down, you have the funds to address that. And when it comes to saving that 1 month, I gave them sort of like this easy, like starting in January. So in the months of, let's say, January and February, January and December, they saved $25. And then February and November saved $50. In March and October, saved $75. April and September, save $100. And then May, June, July, and August, save $125. At the end of the year, you have your emergency fund of $1,000. So that is something I shared with them. Also, to pay off your debts, like Todd mentioned earlier, with the high interest rates, that's called the debt snowball method. It's really, really beneficial because you could utilize that money once you paid off one debt, utilize it towards the next highest debt that you have. Also, like Todd and Angelica both mentioned, try to max out any pension matches that you may have with your employer, even if you have a side gig. If you're able to do that, try to do that as well. And then once you have that first small emergency fund of $1,000, when you're able to, like Todd mentioned, you may not be able to do it your first year of teaching. It may have to come your second or your third year of teaching, but try to build out your emergency fund at least 6 months worth of essential living costs so that you will have that to fall back on. And very key, what Todd mentioned as far as putting your money into a high yield savings account. Todd mentioned a money market account. I specifically use a high yield savings account, which gives me about a 4.5% interest return on my money. So a high yield savings account, a lot of people don't think about that, but when your money is sitting in a regular savings account, like he mentioned, you're probably earning like 0.5%, 0.6%. 1% even, but if it's in a high yield savings account, you're going to maximize your earnings and you'll get 4.5 or a little bit lower than that savings on that account.
Awesome. Angelica, any ideas?
Very good tips. And I was actually going to talk about the snowball effect because that's what my father taught me and taught a lot of things that you're saying. I was like, oh, wow, you sound just like my dad because those are the things that he told me. But I'm glad he started with us very young. So and what Marcel, what you're saying, because if you start very young, because my parents always said, like, looking back, if they did these things, they would have been better off, even though they're doing well. But a lot of the pitfalls they went through, they would have been able to avoid. And so a lot of people are surprised, like my second year teaching, I was able to buy a home. But the key thing is you have to be very disciplined with your money. But I think also another thing was too, I was very blessed. My parents did allow me to stay with them for a year. So I was able to save up money. So don't feel bad because I know a lot of, young people are like, I can't wait to move out. But if you're like in a good relationship with your parents and they're allowing you to stay, home, it's not a bad thing, especially if they're allowing you to save that money. So if you are living at home with your parents or if you're living with someone, make sure you're saving that money. Don't just spend everything that you have. So a key thing is discipline and also having a goal for your money. And Marcel, I liked what you talked about, like what you told your kids, like every month to have like a different goal. Because once you kind of have that goal in your mind and you know where your money is going, you're become more disciplined and you're able to save more. And so because I was able to save and actually knew where my money was going, I was able to save up in order to, to be able to buy a home. But of course, it doesn't matter how long it takes, but if you have a goal, so another key thing is having a short-term goal and a long-term goal. So that was my long-term goal, but my short-term goal was like having an emergency fund. I wanted to save because I knew I want to go like a small trip just to Myrtle Beach during the summer. So I knew some small goals I had. So I wasn't going to use my credit card. I knew I had money saved up for certain things. So if you know you're going somewhere or if you're planning for something, make sure you plan ahead and making sure you have those long-term and also short-term goals. And another key thing is also don't be afraid to talk to your HR because some of the things I was confused regarding my savings account or retirement. And even though I said I understood when I was signing my contract, I did not understand what I was signing. So I did go back and ask them and they really broke it down. So don't be afraid to ask questions, even if it sounds silly or stupid. It's okay to ask other people for help, especially especially with your HR. So don't be afraid to call them. But the key thing, of course, is asking questions and also just know where your money is going and being very disciplined. It may not feel good, but like my dad would always say, when you work hard, you get to play hard. So if you, work hard with your money and knowing where it's going, saving, finding those, saving your money, figuring out where your money is going on the long term, when you're looking back, you're like, wow, that actually helped me out. So the key thing is just being disciplined and also don't be afraid to ask questions.
I think that point about discipline is so key. It's hard because we want things, right? You see something, you want it. Or you're like, even like what Marcel was saying earlier about eating out at home. Sometimes it's like, man, it'd just be so much easier to go out to eat, and then you get that $40 or $50 bill, whereas you could have just gone to Aldi's, picked up, some food for $10 and made enough food for you and your wife or your husband or whatever. So that discipline and also patience is important. was on vacation. This was about 20 some odd years ago. I happened to be in the Bahamas, and I forgot how I met the guy, but I met this guy who was a multimillionaire. And I said, how did you become a multimillionaire? And he said, I did it by I invested my money, and then when I made money from the investment, I reinvested it. I didn't go out and
Mhm.
spend it. And that's the tricky thing is, like, I've invested in stocks and made a bunch of money, or I invested in real estate and made a bunch of money, and it was so tempting to go out and want to spend that, but instead I followed what that guy said. I just reinvested it. Just keep reinvesting it. Keep reinvesting it. I mean, take some of it out to enjoy, for sure. You don't want to. I've seen people that they have money. They're so frugal, or that's a polite term for it, but they're not enjoying their lives. We need to find balance in that. But I think this idea of being disciplined, being patient, keep reinvesting that money, and being patient, and you'll watch it, and it'll start to grow if you do that. It just takes time. And a lot of people are so impulsive and just
Mhm.
want what they want right now, and it just takes like we said, paying off the debts, investing intelligently, whether it's real estate or in the high yield accounts or money market, whatever, stocks. Then one little side note about stocks: just be careful with individual stocks, especially when you're spending a lot of money. I have found that the mutual funds, the 401k, that to me was, I got advice from Motley Fool. They just said, listen, the index fund, which follows the 500 biggest companies in the country, that historically has done, from the beginning of the stock market to now, over a 5-year term. Typically, you're not going to lose any money. You're going to gain about 10% a year or so. So
Mhm.
that's kind of like the no-brainer way to do it. But talk to financial advisors, talk to people you trust, talk to people who have money, and ask them how they got there. That's a huge one.
And that's a key
So
thing too, my parents would say too. They said if there's a place you want to go, hang out with those people. So if everyone around you kind of has, like my parents would say, maybe like a broke mindset or like a impulsive mindset, that's what you're going to do. But if you hang around people who are going somewhere or who are making money, that's what you're going to start thinking and start doing as well. So that was a good thing you mentioned at the end.
all right, we're already at the end of our time. That went really fast.
Did.
Any final thoughts before we sign off?
Um, I would say just budget like a boss. Make sure you have a budget, even if you start off with, a simple Excel spreadsheet. Just make sure that you are aware of all of your expenses. Yes, Angelica, like a planner as well. And you may want to take a look at whether or not you can categorize that into like 50% needs, 30% wants, and then 20% savings or debt repayment. Definitely understand your benefits with your job. Learn about the state retirement plan, learn whether or not you can take advantage of a 403b or 401k, and then start to build your credit by paying your bills on time, and like Todd mentioned, also making sure that when you rack up credit card debt, that you pay it off in 30 days. Just think of it as 30 days net. We're going to pay this off in 30 days, and you'll be well on your way.
Great. All right. Well, thank you both for your time tonight. Thanks to everybody who's tuned in. And this is the final episode of Cool Beans for season 2. We appreciate it. Hopefully, we're going to have a season 3. I just want to wish all the educators out there a wonderful summer. And if you have any questions about anything we went over, you can find contact information for Marcella and myself on the Cool website at cool.us. All you got to do is go to the About page and find our contact information. You can email us. We'll be happy to answer any questions. If folks out there are watching the recording of this and wind up having questions, we'd be more than happy to reach out to you. A couple of things I want to just mention before we sign off. We have this amazing resource. And Marcel, do you want to talk about the Praxis resource that we have for folks?
Yes, if you go to our website, cool/praxis, there is a plethora of resources, or are a plethora of resources available for you to take a look at. We do have licenses available for members of the SCEA to prepare for and study for the Praxis. So please check those resources out.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, that's such an amazing free resource. And I just want to also say thanks to you and to Stephanie Johnson and Angie Brush for the cool coaching program that you operated all year long. I don't think folks know how much time and energy went into that, but like 4 hours a week of coaching the three of you. And I just want to say, if they're watching, to give them a shout out. Thank you so much for doing that for our induction teachers.
Yes.
All right. Well, y'all have a great evening and a wonderful rest of your week. And thanks for tuning into Cool Beans. We'll see you hopefully next year.
See you next year.
Bye,
See ya
everybody.
next year.
Together we learn,
Bye.
together we grow, together we heal, together we flow. Be cool, every teacher, every school. Be cool, every teacher, every school.